Byron, what the fuck are you wearing? What's up, everyone? GoodMicWork back at you with kind of a surprise commentary. I mentioned in my Hell in the Cell reaction video last night that I probably wouldn't be up here until later on in the week to review both Raw and SmackDown. But as it turns out, I have some extra time tonight, and I figured I would come up here and elaborate a little bit more on Hell in the Cell while we discuss Raw at the same time. My commentary last night was relatively short, only 15 minutes of some quick reactions, and I was having all sorts of mic trouble. As some of you might have noticed, there were some staticky parts of it, and I had to actually cut out some really good comments that I had made. So I just didn't feel very good about it, and I wanted to come up here and elaborate more. This will be the last commentary that I am recording on this microphone that appears to be dying. It's a nice Samson microphone, but it's just having a few problems. So I ordered a Blue Yeti microphone, which is like a top-of-the-line YouTube microphone, and it arrives tomorrow. So my next commentary will be recorded on that, and hopefully that will clear up some of these audio issues I've been having. But as far as tonight goes, we're just going to talk about Raw. We're going to review the Halloween Raw that came to us tonight from Hartford, Connecticut. And while we go through the Raw, I might mention a few more things and a few more opinions about last night's Hell in the Cell now that we've had a full day to think about it. So let's get right into the show here. I am going to bounce around a little bit, but I will start with what opened the show, and they opened tonight's Raw with Goldberg. Goldberg was advertised to appear on the show, so we knew that he would, and I think Vince McMahon just has a really sour taste in his mouth over what happened to Goldberg last week in Minnesota, and he wanted to rectify that right away. So I think all week long, Vince McMahon could not wait to get Goldberg back out on TV and make sure the fans are actually going to cheer for him. And tonight's Raw was from Hartford. That's WWE territory. That's WWE country. So during Goldberg's heyday in WCW during the Monday Night Wars, people from that part of the country were generally more WWE fans than WCW fans. So I was actually even a little bit worried about Goldberg tonight. But bringing him out first was probably a good idea. The fans are generally jacked at the beginning of a show. That's usually when they're at their hottest. And having a guy like Goldberg come out was probably a good way to ensure that the fans would cheer or at least be excited or interested somewhat in whatever he had to say. And he makes the big, grand, awesome entrance. The fans are chanting their balls off. And right as he starts his promo, he's interrupted by Paul Heyman. I figured we would probably get Paul Heyman and Goldberg in the ring together first before we got Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. Paul Heyman comes out there and, just kind of reiterates what he's been saying ever since this Goldberg feud started. And that is Goldberg really has no chance of winning this match, and Brock Lesnar cannot wait to avenge that one blemish on his record. And then Paul Heyman starts teasing that Brock Lesnar is actually going to come out, even announces Brock Lesnar to the audience. His music starts playing. Nobody comes out, and Paul Heyman is sitting there on the ring ropes laughing his ass off, saying, "I fooled every single one of you." Goldberg takes offense to that, and before he can really get his hands on Paul Heyman, who completely backs down from Goldberg, saying, "I'm an advocate, I'm just an advocate, please leave me alone," Rusev, of all people, interrupts the segment and comes down to the ring, and you're like, oh shit, they're going to bury Rusev here. He just lost to Roman Reigns last night in a Hell in the Cell match. Now he's going to come out here and get speared and jackhammered by Goldberg. Fuck, that's going to suck. But any chance to hear Rusev talk on the mic is fine with me. I could listen to that guy talk all day. He had me cracking up with some of the things he was saying to Goldberg, and then eventually it did get physical, and it was a little bit of a botch, too. I mean, they started punching each other. Goldberg started going for the knees to the body, and he actually fell down and fell backwards. That scared me a little bit, but he recovered just fine, continued with the knees, and then picked up Rusev and hit him with a jackhammer. I will say Goldberg looked in great shape. I was a little bit worried because the first two times we've seen him on TV, he's been wearing like a big heavy coat or something. You couldn't really get an idea of what kind of shape this 50-year-old is in. And he looked just as big as he ever did. So I was worried he was going to be a lot skinnier. And I definitely think he's a little bit lighter and less bulky than he used to be in his glory days. But still, he looked in pretty damn good condition for somebody his age. I'm still worried about how the match is going to come off as we saw him kind of fall down with those knees to Rusev. If they try to fight that type of combat style in his match with Brock Lesnar, it could be very botchy, very clumsy, and very sloppy. And that's the one big concern I have for this match. But these guys really don't want a repeat of what happened to them at WrestleMania 20. Also, by the way, it's worth mentioning, right after he did jackhammer Rusev, he turned right around and speared Paul Heyman. So Paul Heyman did finally eat a spear like we figured he eventually would in the build-up to this feud. And now we've got several weeks left until Survivor Series. I'm sure at some point, possibly even next week or the week after, we will get Goldberg and Brock in the ring together, either for just a one-on-one confrontation and promo or for a contract signing, something like that. sooner or later you know it's going to have to happen. And most likely they probably will get physical. The fact that Bill got physical tonight, plus he speared Brock Lesnar's friend, Paul Heyman, Brock is going to want revenge, and he's probably not going to settle for just a promo and then walking away from each other. So it'll be interesting to see how the first little bit of physicality between the two comes off on TV, and I'm excited to see it. At this point, it looks like they are going to be building this match for the main event, which I guess is fine. I mean, they're bringing Goldberg in for a lot of money. He's going to bring a lot of eyeballs onto that match. It's going to get a lot of mainstream coverage from ESPN and things like that. So if they got to put this match in the main event, that's fine. It looks like they probably won't have any title matches, which we'll get into later, as the champions are most likely going to be involved in the 5-on-5 Raw versus SmackDown matches. So having a big mega match like this to headline this event is really fine with me. I mean, I understand if people have some complaints about it, but that's the way wrestling is. And WWE likes putting together these big-time drawing, once-in-a-lifetime attraction matches, and whenever you have one of them, generally they do need to close the show. And plus, what we just saw at the last pay-per-view with two women main eventing a show for the first time in WWE's history, I'm definitely not going to complain about the main event of Survivor Series. So the rest of the build-up should be interesting, and hopefully it'll be really, really good. As far as the main event goes tonight on Raw, that was set up by a Mick Foley promo, who came out and commended the entire locker room on a great performance last night at Hell in a Cell, and talked about that he was very disappointed in Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. He was basically proud of everybody except for them for the way that Kevin Owens was able to retain his title, with Jericho locking himself in. Lock it up, man, or lock it in, man. What the hell did he say tonight on Raw? That was fucking great. And the way they kind of trapped Seth Rollins inside the cage and made the whole damn thing a handicap match and allowed Kevin Owens to retain the title. So Mick is pissed. Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho interrupt the promo, and they don't give a shit that he's pissed. And they say, what are you pissed about? That we did whatever I had to do to win an anything goes match with no rules anyway? I was well within my rights to do that, so fuck off. They also go on to mention that Mick Foley needs them for the 5-on-5 match versus SmackDown, and Foley admits that he does need them, even though he's pissed at them. And he said since he needs those two, he also wants to have somebody on the team that he trusts, and he introduces Roman Reigns, who apparently is also going to be a member of the team. He starts getting into a promo battle with Owens and Jericho. Jericho kind of half-ass challenges him to a U.S. title match, which he agrees, and Mick Foley makes it official right there, so that's going to be the main event of Raw. Chris Jericho versus Roman Reigns for the United States title. Roman Reigns is going to have to defend the belt 24 hours after he defended it at Hell in a Cell, and I was really actually hoping that Chris Jericho could pull off an upset here. You got to think that Roman is battered, he's beaten, Jericho didn't even have a match last night, and it would be a perfect opportunity to take the belt off of him and put it with Jericho to match him up with his best friend Kevin Owens, and they can both walk around the WWE with title belts and be extra obnoxious, and it would be amazing TV. But unfortunately that didn't happen. Roman Reigns did wind up getting the win in the main event. He got it via disqualification, though. I think he speared Chris Jericho, and then Kevin Owens came and interrupted the 3 count, and the two of them proceeded to kick the shit out of Roman Reigns until Seth Rollins, who had not appeared on the show all night. So the ending was really spoiled. I mean, even though I wanted Chris Jericho to win the United States title, I didn't expect him to. All of us had pretty much called it, that Seth Rollins was going to come out there and exact his revenge on Chris Jericho, who attacked him after the Hell in a Cell title match last night. So Jericho was owed one by Seth Rollins, so you knew there was no way he was going to walk out of that ring with the United States title. But had he done that, I think it could have made for some fun TV. As much as Seth Rollins wants to be a babyface, he wasn't totally a babyface. He did take his sweet time coming out there to save Roman Reigns. I think Owens and Jericho even hit Roman with their pop-up code breaker finisher, or whatever the hell it is, until Seth finally came out there and fought off Jericho and Owens. And then Rollins and Reigns kind of stood in the ring together side by side as the show went off the air, and the entire crowd was chanting Shield. So I don't know if that's going to be our 5 for the Survivor Series match. We're going to have Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins perhaps, and of course Braun Strowman, who won the Battle Royal tonight, to get a spot on the Survivor Series 5-man team as well. So that's a very, very dysfunctional team. 4 guys that essentially hate each other, and 1 wild card and Strowman in the middle. So they could shuffle some of that around. I still don't even know if Chris Jericho is going to be in the match officially, or Seth Rollins for that matter, but I'm guessing they will be. I mean, if Jericho and Owens are in the 5-on-5 match, the guys that they're feuding with, what the hell are they going to do? So they're most likely going to be teamed up with them, and it's going to be up to Foley in the next several weeks to get these guys together as a cohesive unit to battle SmackDown. So I guess that's the direction they're heading in on television for now, which, you know, isn't that bad of an idea. I actually don't mind one pay-per-view where no belts are defended, because that's the problem. Shit moves so fast. So if they take 1 month off and don't defend the belt again until the end of the year, great. No problem. No complaints for me. And also, just to touch on a little bit more of the Hell in the Cell match between Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens last night, when I was having those mic difficulties and I was getting a lot of static, I was completely marking out over the table spot when Seth Rollins picked up Kevin Owens and threw him through the table, but the part of that commentary was so distorted, I had to cut the whole thing out. So you never even heard me mention last night how awesome that spot was and how great the match was. I mean, this match, I think, was the best of the 3 Hell in the Cell matches easily. As much as I loved the Charlotte and Sasha match, there was definitely some things about that match that made it disappointing as well. And Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins really delivered on all fronts there with some really great work and that just amazing show of strength by Seth Rollins. I mean, that's CrossFit, motherfuckers. I am a believer in that. I mean, Kevin Owens is a pretty heavy guy. He's not the fucking 1-2-3 kid in there. And Seth Rollins had completely lost him on the powerbomb and is able to still lift him all the way back up over his head, walk over to the edge of the ring, and throw him off through 2 tables. It was a pretty impressive spot by both guys, especially Seth Rollins. Of course, the women had all sorts of controversy last night, as I talked about. When I wasn't making a huge deal about Charlotte winning last night, it was only because I appreciated the match they gave us. It had its problems, don't get me wrong. There was the bocce table spot that they couldn't figure out, and even the finish of the match where Charlotte was throwing Sasha on the table. I think the intention was for those tables to break, and they just did not want to. Plus, the whole stretcher spot went a little bit overboard, and it was a little bit cringy, especially when you knew that Sasha was just going to fight her way off of that and get back in the ring. So a little bit predictable, and some of the issues there definitely, I think, allows Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins to get the nod for the best Hell in the Cell match of the night. But I still very much enjoyed the ladies' work, and I thought they more than held their own inside of a Hell in the Cell in an environment that you really don't think of women competing in. And most of the fans' issue with the match was just the fact that Sasha Banks lost. And I completely get it. I really do. But, you know, there's some holes in that logic as well. What I do agree with is the fact that the finish fell flat. You almost didn't see it coming. I thought for a second the referee might have even botched the 3 count and counted 3 by accident because it just seemed like it ended a tad bit awkwardly, and I was surprised. So from that standpoint, I understand completely that it kind of let the wind out of our sails a little bit. We were on such an emotional high that these girls were performing in an awesome match. Despite its faults, it was still a really, really good match, and I think people were into it. And then that finish just, it just let the air out of our tires or whatever. So I understand it from that point of view. But at the same time, when I say look at the facts here, Charlotte has been a dominant women's champion. She's virtually undefeated in pay-per-view title matches. She's bigger, she's stronger, can probably handle herself inside of an environment like that better than Sasha. Plus, she cheated, got an unfair advantage to start the match, so she got to work the whole match against Sasha with that unfair advantage of beating her down before the match started, and then she wound up winning. To me, it's not like that doesn't make sense. What wouldn't have made sense is for Sasha to have this great comeback and wind up annihilating Charlotte. Like, how the hell did she do that? Talk about Roman Reigns being Superman. Well, then she's Superwoman. But the fact that she won the title just a few weeks ago, the fact that she's incredibly over as a babyface, and the fact that it was in her home fucking town, I was just as surprised as everybody when she lost that match. But if you're trying to suspend your disbelief, you're trying to pass this stuff off as competition, it's simulated competition, sometimes the script doesn't go the way you want it to go. Sometimes the home team does not win. Look what's going on with the Chicago Cubs right now. This is a team that hasn't won a World Series in 100-and-something years. They finally make it back to the World Series, and they take one of the first 2 games on the road, allowing them to go home for 3 games and potentially winning the World Series in front of the Chicago crowd at Wrigley Field for the first time in over 100 years. The script couldn't be written better than that, but unfortunately, reality doesn't give a shit what the script wants, and the Cleveland Indians were able to win 2 out of those 3 games. They hold a 3-2 lead over Chicago going back home, and they're most likely probably going to win the World Series, and Chicago is going to go home with nothing. I'm rooting for Chicago. I want the Cubs to win. They certainly deserve it after all this time, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Look at the Golden State Warriors last year against the Cleveland Cavaliers, Game 7 at home, against a big heel in LeBron James, and they fucking lost right in front of everybody, and sometimes shit just doesn't go go the way you want. And if you want to pretend that wrestling is real competition, you have to understand that sometimes the belt is going to flip-flop, and sometimes when you think someone is going to win, they are not, because they got upset by the better man, or the better woman in this case. So I refuse to believe that the finish didn't make any sense. Fans do nothing but complain about predictable finishes. Sasha retaining at Hell in the Cell was relatively predictable. A lot of us predicted her to retain. So for the WWE to swerve us and have a title change, most of the time, that's what the fans claim they want. So fans just don't know what the fuck they want, basically. So I can kind of see both sides of this coin. For people that say that the finish kind of ruined the match or let them down a little bit, I get it. I totally understand it, that you're disappointed that Sasha lost. I thought she should have won also. But I'm not going to say the match was a complete waste and the match sucked and it was not as great as everybody says just because I didn't like who got the 3 count. A lot of people say it doesn't make sense for them to flip-flop the title back and forth. I agree. That's kind of strange to give it to Sasha on Raw, only to take it off of her at SummerSlam, only to give it back to her at Raw, and take it off of her again at Hell in the Cell. My only thought is that maybe, possibly, the plan was for Sasha to never lose the belt to begin with once she won it on Raw the first time. Maybe she was supposed to hold it through SummerSlam, successfully defend it, and then drop it back to Charlotte in Hell in the Cell. If that was the original plan, and that's what happened, then Sasha losing would have been a much easier pill to swallow. She would have had a relatively decent-sized women's title reign instead of 2 really short ones. Plus, she probably would have had an epic feud with Charlotte spanning several pay-per-views and matches throughout the duration of that. And finally, in the brutal Hell in the Cell blow-off, Charlotte wins the belt back. If you book it that way, I really don't see a problem with it. But with Sasha winning it the way she did a couple different times on Raw, a lot of people are using the term hot potato. Yeah, I guess it is hot potato, but Charlotte had a long run with it before she dropped it, so they're bouncing it around a little bit now, probably developing these girls' legacies, because they want these girls to be a big part of their women's division, this women's revolution. They're going to be wrestling for another 10 plus years. To get 3 quick title reigns onto Charlotte, she's now a 3-time ladies champion. Sasha is a 2-time ladies champion. It just sounds good on their resume, and that could be a big part of why they're doing this as well. So there's a lot of factors into it. So don't bitch at me, don't yell at me in the comments section. Oh, you just don't understand. No, trust me, I understand motherfucking perfectly. I'm not even disagreeing with the people that were disappointed in the outcome. I see what you're saying. I can also just see the other side of it as well. And that's a big difference between me and a lot of fans. I really try to look at it both ways. So that's basically my opinion there. As far as what we saw tonight on Monday Night Raw, no Sasha Banks. We just saw Charlotte. She was going to have her All Hail the Queen ceremony or whatever the fuck. And they brought her out there on the big platform and throne. And she cut a promo about how great she was. She ends up getting interrupted by Bayley. Bayley is just not doing it for me. I mean, I know she was super over on NXT. I wasn't even a fan of her there. I mean, for the fans that hate people like John Cena because they're for kids, how can you mark out over somebody like Bayley? It amazed me how much love this girl got. And she's great. She's a great little worker, great personality. I like her a lot. It's just the character, she's fucking 4 years old, for God's sake. So to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And she's out there trying to cut a promo with Charlotte, who's a badass in a leather jacket, who could probably eat Bayley alive. Somehow their promo winds up leading to a match between Bayley and Nia Jax, and Nia Jax beats Bayley. So Bayley was better off in NXT, it seems like. Hopefully they'll build her back up. She might even get a match with Charlotte in the future, maybe even at Royal Rumble or WrestleMania or something like that. So I'm sure Bayley will have her day in the sun. I have no doubt about that. But, to me, she just doesn't do a whole lot for me on Monday Night Raw. Of course, tonight was a Halloween-themed Monday Night Raw. A lot of people were dressed up. The announce team looked fucking ridiculous. Byron, I don't know what the hell you were thinking. You made Corey Graves look normal with what he had on compared to that fucking onesie. Everybody's dressed up, and they had a Halloween-themed match, a street fight, a trick or street fight. Get it? Trick or street? Between Enzo and Luke Gallows. So Enzo is taking on somebody twice his size in a street fight. He comes out there dressed as Buzz Lightyear from fucking Toy Story. I mentioned on Twitter that I've never seen those movies, and people are like, what the fuck, you've never seen them? I can't believe it. So, okay, chill. I'll check them out next time I get the chance. So it was an overly ridiculous and stupid themed type of segment and brawl, which I'm usually okay with. I don't mind them doing things for Thanksgiving. Back in the day, they do food fights and everything, and and biscuit and gravy bowl wrestling matches with the Divas and all that shit. So they've always done stuff like this, but Gallows and Anderson, this badass team, who I finally started feeling a little bit better about last night when they beat the hell out of Enzo and Cass, now they got to come out here in this silly match and probably lose because of the whole 50-50 booking thing. And sure enough, Enzo, in that ridiculous little costume, beats badass Luke Gallows in a trick or street fight where they put a pumpkin on his head, and it was just, oh god, I just hated it. I would have rather this match take place between Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel, not somebody with actual credibility like Luke Gallows. Nakamura probably watched this match and immediately gave his notice to WWE management. It was ridiculous. I really, really don't like dumb, goofy-ass matches like that. I understand they have to be there. They have a place on the show. A lot of what WWE does is marketed right towards 8 to 12-year-olds, so I'm okay with, and I will allow this type of shit to happen. I just wish they would think about which type of competitors they put in this match. That's all. As far as what else happened on Raw, not much. We did have a Cruiserweight title match, a rematch from last night's pay-per-view. Brian Kendrick, the new champion, defending against TJ Perkins, and he got himself purposely counted out to save his title. Both TJ and Brian Kendrick are coming off as huge pussies in this thing. Brian Kendrick wants to have TJ let him win, and TJ is showing sympathy to him during matches, and his gimmick is kind of Bailey-ish too, where he looks like a fucking 5-year-old out there. So these two guys are just little kids to me wrestling each other. It's not getting over well with me, at least right now. We did get another 6-man Cruiserweight match as well, which was virtually a rematch of last night's kickoff show, only instead of Sin Cara, they replaced him with Rich Swann. And he and Cedric Alexander and Lince Dorado did defeat Drew Gulak, Tony Nese, and Arya Daivari in another 6-man match. It was not nearly as good. Like I said, the crowd was not nearly as into it either, and it was kind of flat. I mentioned Braun Strowman briefly earlier on, winning that Battle Royal to earn himself a shot, so kind of a lazy way to get him into the 5-on-5 match at Survivor Series, but whatever. How about the New Day promo tonight? That was actually a Halloween costume that I enjoyed. They dressed up as the three faces of Right: Charles Wright, the Godfather, Papa Shango, and Kama Mustafa. That was great stuff. It was cool to see Big E wearing the Kama attire. Remember back when it was rumored that the New Day were going to be formed and we were wondering if they might be like a Nation of Domination type of gimmick, so I liked that Big E had that stuff on. And I think it was Xavier who was Papa Shango and Kofi was the Godfather, so good stuff there. Cesaro and Sheamus were back together for a tag team match against the Shining Stars. They defeated them. They did have some miscommunication in the Battle Royal earlier on, so they're just really playing up the fact that these guys cannot get along, but they're still teaming together. And even on the pay-per-view, they did the backstage segment between the two of them where they're bitching about who pays for the rental cars and stuff like that. I don't know if Mick Foley is making these guys travel together. I just thought they had a team together. They don't have to sleep in the same fucking bed. If you hate each other so much, just go out there and have your match and say, okay, see you next week, peace. You know, that's all you got to do. So why these guys feel like they got to ride and room together on the road, I have no idea. So all in all, this Raw gave me pretty much what I expected out of a Halloween-themed edition. Also, another thing I did not mention last night when I was reviewing Hell in the Cell is the new show that they have called Raw Talk, basically just copying what SmackDown does with Talking Smack. And I didn't mention that last night either because I started recording my commentary right as the pay-per-view ended, so I never watched it. Still really haven't watched it, but I'm okay with it, provided they don't do it on Raw. And that's what I was waiting to see. I was waiting to see if they were going to do Raw Talk tonight. And it doesn't look like they did, which they don't need. Raw's 3 fucking hours long. You don't need another half an hour. For SmackDown, it's perfect because they're only 2 hours. So if they do the Raw Talk only after pay-per-views, that I'm okay with because sometimes you might want to see some extra stuff after a pay-per-view. So provided that Raw Talk happens only after Raw pay-per-views and not after Monday Night Raw itself, I have no problem with the segment, and I'm not surprised that WWE copied the idea. It's not like Raw's copying SmackDown. WWE's copying themselves. Talking Smack is something that's actually turned out to be quite successful for them, so they want to do the same thing on Raw, and I can understand that. So that's it for me. I'm out of here. Like I said, you can probably expect to hear from me in a few days. I'll probably come up here at some point and touch on SmackDown. Next week will be up in the air with Raw and SmackDown because, of course, SmackDown is taped. We also have the election here in the United States. I have no idea what's going to be going on with me at work. So next week is up in the air as far as exactly when I come up and do a review, but most likely it will be a Raw and SmackDown joint review. And of course, like I've been mentioning, the 2 DVD reviews that I'm working on are almost done. They still have a little bit of work to do on them. I am still re-editing my WrestleMania Memories commentary. That'll be re-uploaded in a couple of weeks as well. I am ready to start working on another Q&A as well. Thank you to everyone that have already sent questions in for that to goodmicwork@gmail.com. If you want to participate in the Q&A, you must send it to that email address. And I'm still working very hard on everything else that I have planned for you guys between now and the end of the year. So I will catch you guys in a few days. Leave me all your comments on Monday Night Raw, Hell in the Cell, and what you expect to see at Survivor Series in the comments below, and I will talk to you very soon. Until next time, peace.